Earthlings, welcome yet again to another special time tunnel. Now, if you're not familiar with the time tunnels, we are putting together an archive of some of the historical films and events, etc., connected to the animal liberation movement. So that's what it's all about. You can find that on my YouTube channel. So that's YouTube Roger Yates. And then if you go to the playlist, it'll say Vegan Time Tunnel or Roger's Vegan Time Tunnel, and they will all be there for your viewing. They're different lengths, because they're different subject every week, and they go out on a Thursday at my 7 p.m., which is Irish British 7 p.m. for people interested in that. And so our next one coming up is about attitudes to other animals. So this is going to be one of the shorter ones. Yeah, so that's it. So anyway, welcome to another Vegan Time Tunnel. And welcome along to Andy. You're muted, I believe.
Sorry.
Yeah, so welcome along. As you can see, everyone, Andy is here again. Mr. Enhancement, I think, is...
Yeah, I'll take that. That's fine. This one's quite a good one, though. I was quite happy with the... Because, the audio is really bad on this. And although, obviously, we take the religious element out, it's actually quite a good little film. So, yeah, I'm quite happy with how this has turned out.
Yes, in fact, in terms of the enhancements, the audio is much better than the original, but the visuals are only slightly better. Is that the way it worked?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and that's kind of going to be, for the most part, the case going forward. If it's been recorded, say pre-2000, there's only so much that I can do with it. If it's been recorded after that and it's just a bit dodgy, I can correct some of that stuff. But yeah, if it's kind of like flickers and things like that, it's not a lot I can do apart from the audio.
No. Just by common sense, it must be a lot more difficult to sort out an old visual from an old kind of audio, I suppose. Right.
Yes.
What I want to talk to you about before we launch into this, which is We Are All Noah, and the reason that it's relevant is that it starts off with some vivisection footage. And we're going to give you a content warning before it comes on, so we'll remind you about that. But in terms of the relevance, it's World Day for Laboratory Animals today, April the 24th. I think that was originally started off by either the NAVS, National Anti-Vivisection Society, or the BWV. At least I think they might have taken turns in the 1980s in organising them, but I know Kim Stallwood certainly did. And speaking of Kim Stallwood, let me bring this screen up, which is this is the Culture and Animals Foundation. This is Tom Regan's foundation that he formed with his wife Nancy. Now, Andy, you're quite a bit of a Regan student, if not scholar, nowadays. So I just wanted you to say a few things about what you've kind of learned about Tom Regan's character and his personality and his relationships with others, like Peter Singer, for example, but also the split with Regan. Do you want to say? I know that's a bit of a large template, but you want to say a bit about all that?
Yeah, sure. So just straight away, much rather be a student or a scholar than a sophomore, as he would put it, as that would be deemed as the opposition. But yeah, absolutely. So to sort of touch on that, I suppose the Singer bit first. Whenever you've heard Regan speak, I'm sure there's always that kind of like humble gentleness to him, which is kind of his personality to a T, isn't it? I don't imagine. Take the debate we watched last night. You can see how angry potentially he is when he takes to the podium for the summary. He doesn't release any of that. He's still even being heckled as he's speaking, and it's still the height of politeness in return. So I think a lot of the times when he spoke about him or used him as a reference, it's mainly out of more like respect. Another fellow philosopher, another fellow academic. I don't think he's supporting him because obviously fundamentally they're opposed in what they believe. So, but I think in terms of, say, to take someone like Francione or someone else who would, literally say Singer's wrong in the same way that I probably would, I just don't think that's Regan's personality at all, is it? I mean, I've never seen him lose his temper at any point. I've never seen him have hostility or conflict with anyone, even if they are completely opposing in terms of viewpoints. I mean, look at the Pat Kenny show or any of these things where he's not exactly in a great environment or situation, and he's still the height of politeness, the height of it just embodies who he is. So I suppose if you took that into consideration, I can definitely also understand the side of that, why you might get frustrated with him, why you might sometimes be like, come on, Tom, we need to have a little bit more ruthlessness about it. But it's just not who he was. And, it never was going to be who he was. I could imagine, going back to you asked about the potential fallout between him and Gary. A lot of that comes down to kind of that march, doesn't it? From 95, is it? Or 96, where it was almost like it had been hijacked.
Then it went, 1990 first, and then 1990. Yeah.
So where it is kind of like, and I can definitely put myself in Gary Francione's position, where it doesn't matter how highly you think of him, it'd almost be like, I suppose if you said, look, I'm going to go to this environmental march tomorrow because, I think we need to start subsiding some of our views, I'd be thinking, what? Like, after everything you've said, after all the conversations we've had, after all that time we've spent together as like two couples, say, and everything else, it's not just about doing activism. They were very, very, very close friends who would have probably at one point been completely on the same page. So it's probably not the nicest way to call it betrayal, but I can also understand why that might have been how it came across to Gary. Almost like you're not just betraying me, you're betraying your own philosophy, your own views. But I can also see from Regan's point why he did it, because it was kind of like the controversy would have been everything he avoided. It's just not confrontational like that, is he? You wouldn't have wanted hostility, you'd have wanted compromise and resolution.
I think that's all right, and I tend to think that you've got to almost like in this kind of scenario have some sympathy for both of them, because Francione was probably thinking, well, in fact, there's that famous thing where they did their first kind of joint rally together, and Regan said to Francione, I think we're seeing the birth of the animal rights movement, right? And so yeah. And so Francione is going to go, yeah, we are. Let's keep it going and everything. And then Regan just doesn't want to put up with all the backlash that he got, whereas Francione's personality is okay with that, and it's kind of yin and yang kind of thing. Because if they were both together, their different personalities would have probably really worked quite well in terms of the relationship. It's just
absolutely,
yeah. I mean, it's just
I mean, if you were to say, put yourself in the perspective, say, of like, I don't know, animal agriculture or animal uses as one industry for a moment, they would be perceived as a big threat, probably more so than anyone that's come since. I mean, in terms of them collectively together, in terms of what they were writing, in terms of what they were saying, in terms of how they could get other people to understand this, they were a threat. A serious threat. So, like, absolutely. Together, they'd have been that balance. But separately, obviously, they've each got their own weaknesses. Sadly.
We've obviously said that Reagan's age kind of told against him in the end. Going back to the Culture and Animals Foundation, the thing that's worried me a little bit about this is the fact that there seems to be not total, but there's been certainly an element of invisibilizing Tom Regan from his own foundation here, and I think that in general terms, the movement has treated Tom Regan appallingly, and this doesn't help. So, if you wanted to find out about the founder of this foundation, you have to go to the about thing there, and now it says the Regans. Now, it used to be that when you went onto the homepage of this, you'd have a big tab to Tom Regan, and now it's kind of tucked away here. Then when you click on this, this is kind of worse in a sense, because there's a heck of a lot. I mean, you've started to look through this kind of archive, Andy, and there's a heck of a lot of it, but actually finding it is quite a task. And so this is the kind of blurb about the Regans, and then here you'll see that's the first of the hyperlinks, and then there's another one here, and you can hardly see them. There's another one. other materials, Bird in a Cage, and then all the way down to this one here, which is videos. And so then you've got a whole set of different ones. So, and it's also taking you away from the Culture and Animals Foundation to something else now as well. So it's quite interesting in the sense that they've not kind of really done justice, I don't think, to Tom Regan. Although I suppose they might say that, oh, well, this is a site now where we can put everything of Tom's together. But even that hasn't actually ended up being the case. And you made that point that it looks like they're kind of Googling Tom's name and just adding stuff that other people have done now at this stage, right? And so,
yeah, I mean, without being disrespectful, if they gave me admin access to that website right now, I could improve that archive overnight. That's how lack of effort has gone into it, and I don't mean that in a rude way. I'm being quite serious. If you gave me access tonight, by tomorrow there'd be a considerable more amount of stuff on there. It's not hard. It's not serious effort. I've only found it by looking for it. So if you're going to be running a page that's kind of dedicated to him, yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what would be wrong with them doing what you're doing, which is to kind of bring Reagan up to date to make it more user friendly for the 21st century, rather
Nothing.
than
But even if they didn't want to, they could very easily update with some of the videos that have been done. So, I mean, some of the videos that were on Vimeo that I moved across to YouTube and stuff, they could add those now very easily. It just shows that it's almost like no one's taking it as seriously as it should be taken. No one's checking regularly. It's almost like it'll just do. And that's sad.
Yeah. Now, lastly on this, I want to point out this screen, right? And so I contacted the Culture and Animals Foundation because there's two versions. Oh, actually, this one now. Wait a minute. Is that the animal? Yeah, because there's two versions. All right. So this is the animal rights zone. So this one is okay. So they're both there then. Okay. So this morning when I was looking through, I found that they'd reinstated the shorter version of this, in which the critique of utilitarianism, i.e. Peter Singer's position, and most of the animal rights movement's position, has been taken out, whereas this one has still got it in. So it does look like they're both there. So at least that's good in a sense. It's interesting. I don't know who produced that edited version of Reagan's 89 opening speech, but that edited version has got more views on YouTube than the full version. So there's something interesting there as well. So, okay, I need to stop my screen in order to bring up the film.
Well, hopefully on that note, based on the one we released yesterday, someone can make a brand spanking new version of both the opening speech and the summary that are in better quality than anything else that exists on YouTube and get the most views on that instead.
Yeah, I got a question on my I got a question on the debate that we did, which you might be able to answer better than me, Andy, which is don't the BBC or the production people have the original tapes?
Apparently not.
No, that's right.
If you yeah, because that's right. They got asked by me and actually the person who I originally found the debate on Vimeo on their channel. I've all got it in the description too, saying it's the last remaining copy. And I think it even says it in the first slide, basically, as well. That it's been around for a long time. Basically, I think it's the only one that exists, or the only one that existed, and now we've got it obviously digitally.
Yeah, well, I thought I had one of the only tapes because this guy Don Jenkins in Wales, he recorded the entire 5 hours of the Animal Night thing. Because there's some interesting things apart from the debate.
Yeah, I can't find any of what comes before. So you can find it gives you the timeline of the night, and you can read what happened. And there's
a little bit of the spitting image, isn't there?
Yes, yeah. There's the downloadable video, isn't there, which is like almost like a trailer for the open.
Yeah.
But all of the other stuff from the rest of that night, I think the rest of the whole arena presentation is missing.
Yes, it's really interesting, isn't it? So. It's interesting how, I mean, like we always tend to think, well, nothing gets lost on the internet, but quite a things do, and then they mysteriously come back again, which what happened with this full debate.
Yeah, in fact, actually, there's a big niche on YouTube that it's called lost archive footage or lost footage or whatever. There's a big sort of following of
Oh,
people
right,
that do
okay.
that all the time. Yeah.
And I don't suppose that Richard Rider clip would be there, because that if we could correct that, I mean, it's only a couple of seconds, but it's enough to kind of think, oh,
Yeah.
what was that, right? And so
Yeah. It's a shame.
Okay, so this is Tom Regan's, I think, first film, because one of the things that he wanted to do, and we're probably going to share a video where he's talking about the Culture and Animals Foundation and what all the aims were. One of which was to produce some educational films for various communities. So this one is aimed at the religious community. So there is that aspect to it, and also, as I said before, it's relatively graphic in terms of quite a lot of the we were just talking about this before, and quite a lot seems to become, well, we know comes from the Animals film, which was like 5 years earlier. So the intriguing thing there for the detectives of the history of the movement is, did Regan give Victor Schonfeld material, or was it the other way around? It's really that's quite interesting. And there's also some footage in both, I think, but certainly in the Animals film, which actually comes from the US Navy, which seem to have an obligation. If you ask them, they have to make certain things public and that. And so there is some pretty graphic footage. There's vivisection, there's fur trade. So some of it is a bit hard to watch. So we just want to make that clear, because that's not normally stuff that I put on this channel. So I just wanted to make sure that no one is unaware of that. And there was a trigger warning, content warning in the blurb as well. So do take that.
And just to let everyone know, it's not very too far into it either. Once he kind of does the initial talk about the boat, kind of expect.
Yeah, because it's an interesting historical part of the kind of nuclear program, really, where you ended up with something called the atomic arc, and that's the reason for the name of the film, and that's presumably why he thought of the religious angle, and then he thought of, well, let's take that initial start and then go to the religious kind of aspect to it. There's a bit of a kind of interesting, this one, Andy. What do you think of this? You know, that kind of ceremony for the other animals that comes up, that's a bit cringy, right?
It is a little bit, but at the same time, I suppose, each to their own and all that kind of thing. It's a bit strange that kind of, there's like there's an elephant and a camel and a lady holding a duck. It's just a bit strange, but I suppose it's much better that they're doing that than any of the other religious animal related ceremonies that usually end in violence, I suppose. So there is that aspect.
Oh yeah, well, there's quite a few of those that we all know about, isn't there?
So it's not. It's at least not. It's a little bit cringy and it's a little bit dated, obviously. But it's much better to see them celebrated rather than anything else.
Well, I was thinking, from our point of view, there's no critique of pet ownership and stuff, right?
No.
Yeah. So that's the bit that kind of thought, because it's interesting, isn't it? The way that language changes and attitudes change. And there's some things now that Regan says which we wouldn't say anymore.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
And in fact, we might be doing another special on Friday. We're in the process of setting this up about language use and everything. But that we'll have to wait and see if it comes together before we can say any more, really. Okay, so without further ado then, and with yet another kind of content warning, we'll start the film.
All of us know the story of Noah's Ark. After Adam's fall, evil flourished. God decided to make a new beginning. To Noah, he revealed the coming of a great flood and commanded him to build an ark to save his family and the animals. And so in faith, Noah built his ark. In time, the animals came, and so did the rain. For 40 days and 40 nights it rained. The entire earth was flooded. But the ark survived. And when in time a dove returned with an olive branch, Noah knew that the water was subsiding. His family and the animals had been saved. To all who survived, God promised that he would never send a second flood. All of us know this story, but few know the story of a second ark. In 1946, on the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean, more than 4,000 animals were loaded onto a ship. They were shaved, tagged, and tethered on deck. Then, in the interest of radiation research, they were left to bear the full fury of an atomic explosion. The ship was called the Atomic Ark. Unlike Noah's precious cargo, the animals on board the Atomic Ark were not there to be saved. Animals are used in science for many reasons, not just atomic tests. Perhaps as many as 3 animals are killed in laboratories every second, just in America. Perhaps twice that number worldwide. The catalog of their use is not pretty. No sensitive person will find it easy to look at their pain. And yet, when it comes to the use of animals in laboratories, we must not turn aside, we must look inside. These cats, with their eyes sewn shut, are being used in behavioral studies. Suffering an induced seizure, this monkey is the subject in test for anti-epileptic drugs. These piglets have had their spinal cords intentionally damaged in order to investigate traumatic spinal injuries. This monkey has had his head injured in a study of brain trauma. Vision research is the reason for this puppy's missing eye. What we have just glimpsed is not exceptional. Every day, thousands of animals are burned, drowned, suffocated, starved, dehydrated, used in educational settings, in instructional labs in our schools, and in practice surgery. Sometimes animals are used in pursuit of medical knowledge. More often, they are used in non-medical context. People throughout the world are beginning to question the scientific and ethical validity of using animals in science, of keeping intelligent social creatures in restraining chairs for months at a time. Voices from within the major religions of the world are beginning to be heard. The dissenting voice of Rabbi Sidney Jacobs is no longer his alone.
The theme of concern over non-human animals is one which is consistent throughout Judaism, going back all the way to the first chapter of the book of Genesis, all the way through the books of Jonah and the book of Job, into post-biblical rabbinical literature, which establishes the basic Jewish principle which we adhere to this day, called Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim, the suffering of living things, the pain of living things.
One way animals suffer is in the Drey's test. A liquefied substance, such as oven cleaner or paint stripper, is placed in the eye of albino rabbits. The degree of damage is measured at various intervals. Blindness may result. Anesthetics are not used. Rabbits sometimes break their back in their futile attempts to escape the searing pain. The Drey's and other painful tests routinely are done in the course of developing most household products and cosmetics. Yet there already are safe items for the home and attractive cosmetics that have not been tested on animals.
I want you to understand that every time you pick up an innocent-looking tube of toothpaste, or the dandruff shampoo in your shower, the liquid bleach in your laundry, the powder you scrub your stove with, oven cleaner, hairspray, lipstick, floor polish, room deodorizers, dishwashing detergents, all these are results of testing on the eyes of rabbits. Speaking of the pain and suffering of living things, The Draves test is among the most horrendous product testing devices ever brought upon the market.
Many millions of animals are used in psychological research. This cat, for example, is being used in an experiment that permits her to drink milk only if she will accept a painful shock at the same time.
I feel that Judaism must have a strong opposition to animal experimentation, which involves shocking animals or doing any psychological change of the complexion of animals. So from the point of view of Jewish law, I would have to say that Judaism has a categorical imperative not to condone such experiments. Judaism states very clearly that animals are entitled to a basic dignity.
Critics of the use of animals in science call for the development of alternatives, not for the abandonment of the scientific enterprise. They point to examples such as Resuscidog, a lifelike model that enables students to learn how to revive a dog who has had a heart attack. Only a few years ago, dogs were given a heart attack in order that students might learn how to resuscitate them. Thanks to the development of Resuscidog, this normally fatal procedure is today altogether unnecessary. Cell and tissue culture techniques also hold great promise. One test, the Ames test, already has proven to be a quicker, cheaper means of screening for possible carcinogens than animal tests. And pioneering work in this area promises to replace the Draves test. Even the computer offers great hope. One program, called Operation Frog, enables students to dissect a frog on a screen, not a once-living organism. Technology is making the use of animals obsolete in educational context, according to Rabbi Jacobs. He calls upon students and their parents to help reform instruction in the life sciences.
I think that more and more young people are emboldened to address themselves to their instructors and their professors and say, I will not dissect a living creature just for the purpose of an abstract experiment. And I think that if parents, if fathers and mothers will encourage our young people whose sensitivity has been increased, we will see marked progress in this area.
There are other questions in addition to students' rights that demand our attention. The larger issue of our proper relationship to God's creation is receiving new, urgent re-examination in the religious community.
The saints offer us some depth of insight into the basic orientations of our Western religious traditions. And so it's quite appropriate that we look at people like Martin of Porres in the Latin American world. Martin of Porres had this intimate acquaintance with the animal world, with the domestic animals, but even with mice. Francis of Assisi had a fraternal model of relationship with the natural world. He had the sense of being one family with them, with the fish, with the birds. He talked to them and listened to them. They preached to him, he preached to them. The universe is a celebratory event. Life is celebration. What do the birds do? They celebrate. They fly, they sing, they're beautifully colored. What do the fish do? They celebrate. What does any form of life do? Celebrate. But it's always the total life community that's celebrating. It's always the total community that's involved. Trapping, particularly for furs and for certain ornamentation purposes on the part of humans at the present time, represent a certain degradation of the natural world that is particularly to be regretted or to be done away with. To use the natural world for such needless and vain purposes and to destroy so much beauty, to utilize for ephemeral human purposes. So it betrays almost a pathology of mind. And in our times, is particularly crucial because whatever may have been the condition in former times and whatever needs humans may have had for the things that animals provided, that's not true of ourselves, so that we don't have the excuse or the reason that earlier peoples may have had.
As a fundamentalist, I certainly believe that God created the world and all the things that are therein. The psalmist said in the 8th Psalm, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. And he goes on to explicitly state that God created the heavens and the earth and the sea and the cattle and the beast of the field and all that is in therein. And of course, as a creationist, I have a very deep regard for the wonderful things that God has made. As a young man growing up in South Alabama, before my conversion, I learned to be an avid hunter. After I met Jesus Christ and my heart was changed, I had in my possession hunting and fishing license for 4 different states. I'll never forget my first hunting experience. I went out to hunt that afternoon, and I had particularly decided to hunt squirrels. I sat down under a big hickory tree, and in a very short time, the little squirrels were out playing, and I'd suddenly realized that I'd lost my desire to ever shoot one again. I just placed my gun down and began to admire these wonderful creatures of God. It wasn't very long until I was out of the hunting business as far as that's concerned. My heart was filled with love. I didn't want to see anything suffer, and today I can't bear to see things suffer.
Few of us hunt for food, but most of us do eat animals, and that too may be a cause for honest religious concern. For most of us, our image of a farm is the image of our childhood. We all remember the pictures in the books. So do today's children. Listen to their voices as they imagine what a farm is like.
There would be chickens running round in the farmyard, pecking at the ground, searching for food. Sometimes they flap their wings and roll in the dust. The hen would be looking after the chicks if she had any.
Young pigs would be running about in the fields or being fed by their mother.
In the past, most farms were as these children imagine them. Cows grazed in the pasture. Birds scurried about the farmyard. Hogs cooled themselves in the mud. Together with their human caretakers, they formed a balanced, harmonious system of life. Some farms, though very few, remain this way. Most farms today are rather different.
Today's poultry industry has moved indoors into mechanized plants called factory farms. In this battery hen operation, food is delivered mechanically. Eggs are collected and sorted automatically. As many as 7 or 8 hens may stand in a wire mesh cage of 18 by 24 inches for as long as a year. There is no daylight. There is no nesting, no fresh air. There is no room even to stretch their wings. The eggs in our supermarkets come from farms like this one. Hog farming, too, has changed. These are the sows. They live out their pregnancy in individual stalls. Unable to turn around or root the ground, they gnaw on the iron bars for hours at a time. There is no fresh air, no sunlight. They live in these conditions for up to 5 years, except when they're giving birth. Then they are moved to the farrowing stall where the piglets nurse. The sow still is unable to turn around. After a few weeks, she is returned to her former stall, there to await a new pregnancy. As for the piglets, they are raised to their maturity in small pens. Crowded together, they may see the sunlight and breathe fresh air only once a day, when they are fed. Even dairy cattle are being taken off the land. In the United States, over 50% of these animals are raised permanently indoors. As a result of genetic engineering, some dairy cattle must be milked 3 times a day. The weight of the milk and the unnatural flooring takes its toll on the cow's joints, swollen and tender ankles, knees, hips. As for the male calves born on a dairy farm, they normally are taken from their mothers at birth and raised in isolation, in semi-darkness, in individual stalls too narrow for them to turn around in. Their diet is deficient in iron. They are raised in a chronically anemic condition. These animals become the veal we buy, and people prefer pale veal, the flesh of an anemic animal. How should an informed, compassionate Christian ethic respond to our treatment of animals in modern agriculture and to their slaughter?
There are many situations which Jesus obviously did not confront. So when we are trying to reconstruct what he might have said, of course we are inferring what he might have said from the whole character of his life and the words that he did leave. Now, in the case of factory farming, it's a pretty safe inference that the outrage at what is done in some circumstances there, without any care for the stress in the animals involved, would evoke exactly that sort of outrage, which led him into the temple, overturning the tables of the money changers, who seemed to him, whether rightly or wrongly, to be just making a profit out of this whole transaction. All religions emphasize that we are living at the moment in a very disordered world and a disordered state of our own being. In the West, this sense of disorder is very profound, whether in Judaism or in Christianity. But both religions emphasize that there is a vision towards which we have to move, in which the original harmony is restored. In a sense, it's a return to the Garden of Eden. So the great vision, the messianic vision, is of the wolf lying down with the lamb once more, of a return to Eden where even the animals were vegetarian. So in all religions, the way in which our feelings about animals, our responsibilities, how we live with them, how we handle them, is a tremendous opportunity which they ought not to miss. Because the issue of animals and what we do with them is an opportunity for religions, both East and West, to find how in practice can I now realize that vision of order and harmony, which is fundamental to my tradition, whether I live as a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Christian, or a Jew.
Then there is the plight of literally millions of our closest animal friends, our companion animals. All who have shared their lives with dogs know their distinct personalities, have felt their trust. And with cats, we have marveled at their serenity, laughed at their play, felt the purr of their quiet affection. Millions of these animals are killed each year, just in the United States, for lack of a home and loving hands.
A real scar in terms of our humanity and in terms of our culture is the fact that 15 to 20 million animals are killed yearly in pounds around the United States. It's so easy for us to deal with statistics. We think, 15 to 20 million animals are killed, euthanized a year. That's kind of an abstract. And yet I don't think it really comes home for us until we actually see one animal euthanized. And for me personally, in terms of my spiritual life, what does this do to me when that breath goes out of the world? How do we deal with that? And I think if we can see that happen, we as Christians can be a little more sensitized then to what 15 to 20 million of these single deaths, of this life-taking, really means for us. One of the issues that Christians need to deal with in terms of the whole animal exploitation is that of pound seizure. We assume that if Fido or our pet cat somehow gets picked up, that animal is going to be safe until we get there, or that animal is going to be safe until some compassionate person comes along and adopts the animal. But the reality of it is that we have an issue known as pound seizure. These animals can be put up and sold to dealers, who in turn can sell them for animal experimentation. We assume that the animal is going to be safe in the pound, and yet then the animal is sold and money is made on this. So it's compounding evil for evil in terms of the least of these created beings.
The least of these. In response to criticism, scientists increasingly are looking for animals to replace dogs in the lab. Pigs are the preferred model, the new choice as the least of these. This is a change many people will not view as progress. Increasingly, this is true even in the case of the religious community. In London in July of 1984, a precedent-setting conference was held on the theme, Religious Perspectives on the Use of Animals in Science. The proceedings of this conference have now been published, and a new organization, the International Network of Religion and Animals, representing all the major religions of the world, recently has been formed. Other signs of religion's involvement with animal rights is the growing number of services that celebrate love for animals. The Jewish faith now has a Haggadah that affirms the moral ties binding the faithful to animals.
May we come to you with clean hands that hurt no creature.
Some churches have even taken the issue of animal rights into their own hands and have devised a service in celebration of animals.
Let us pray. Give us ears to hear the cries of those creatures tortured in the name of science, skinned in the name of fashion, and neglected in the name of economy.
Let us hear their cries, O God.
Various liturgies already contain a ceremony for blessing animals, and increasingly these are being used.
Of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit upon all these animals today.
These are occasions for public affirmation of our love of animals and of God's love for all creatures, both the small and the great. Is religion's recent concern for animals a temporary aberration? Will it soon pass away? Or is this an early sign of a long-term commitment to join the struggle for animal rights?
Every single generation has some specific issue, which is for it the great opportunity either to grow up spiritually and morally or to fail. And there is absolutely no question that the great issue for us is the issue of how do we reverence the created order and the planet. And it comes up in different ways, ecologically and so on, but it's focused very sharply in terms of animals. Here are our nearest relatives. Now, I would guess that most of us are going to perhaps glimpse the issue and then sink back. But there is here a tremendous opportunity for all of us. And maybe if we opened our eyes a little and really looked at what is happening to the animals, we ourselves might have that opportunity to grow just that little bit in moral and spiritual stature.
I would love to see the Messianic kingdom of God come to fruition in the sense where all human beings could look at the animal world as kindred, and that we could live in harmony. In the view of Isaiah, that the lion and the lamb will lie down together, I would like to think that not only could the lion and the lamb lie down together, but that human life could co-join with the realm of animal life in creating a meaningful existence for all of us.
In the book of Proverbs, chapter 12 and verse 10, the writer sums up our responsibility to the animal. He said, "The righteous man regardeth the life of his beast." And in my own way of thinking, I have a divine responsibility to make the life of the beast as enjoyable as possible in my lifetime, to be as compassionate as I can.
We are so intimate with all forms of life that we have one genetic bonding. All living forms are genetically bonded to each other. And in this sense, every living form is cousin to every other living form. And this gives us that sense of living in a larger society. We've been accustomed to live in a human society. Now we have to learn to live in the life community.
We have to consider that these are indeed the least of these. They have no advocate, they have no voice, because they are not thought as being able to think or to be equal with God's creation in terms of humanity. But I think any piece of our universe, our creation, which is hurting, as a Christian, we have to struggle with our response to that. Our Christian faith has to say, we are simply asked to make gentle our bruised world, to be compassionate of all.
Asking the right questions is the first step in arriving at the right answers. Whatever we might think of our duties regarding animals, whether we think we should not eat, hunt, trap, or otherwise harm them, or whether we think we may do so, whatever the right answers, these are the right questions. For like Noah, we must take responsibility for the fate of animals, especially when their fate is sealed by our decisions. In some ways, we are all Noah.
All creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah. The burning sun with golden gleam, the silver moon with softer gleam. Oh, praise him, oh, praise him. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
I've muted myself. Interesting end
I was
there.
going to say, I
saying,
thought it was mine. I
yeah,
can see you speaking, but it's.
I did it. You did it. You did it at the beginning. I did it this time. So, yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, interesting end. And
I've got to be honest. I don't like the ending, not just because of the song, but obviously the film's quite like hard hitting. And that, as soon as that music comes on, all I think about is that sketch of Mr. Bean when he gets the chewing gum stuck in his pocket. It's all that I thought about every time. Obviously, I've listened to it quite a few times, testing the sound, and every time I'm like, just completely ruins all of that you've just built up. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know that particular Mr. Bean thing, so I can't comment. Somebody said
he's sat in church basically, and like he falls asleep, and then every time he wakes up, oh, hallelujah, yeah.
All right, okay. Yeah, it exactly sounds just like that, did it, Andy?
Pretty much.
So
it's probably not much older than that actually, because it's probably not 1990 or something. So yeah.
So we pop back on because it's interesting. I'm wondering about whether, again, this is I think reflection of Reagan's character, because in debates, and we pointed out in the 1989 debate, he cited Peter Singer. There's a couple of films where he shows animal liberation as a book to go to, as well as people like Mary Midgley. Now, this is interesting because I came up with the idea, and let's see what you think about this, Andy, which was that I think because Reagan was an academic, I think that when he cites things or shows things, he doesn't see it as an endorsement. He almost like sees it as almost like a lit review or a kind of citation, right?
Yeah.
And so if he cites Peter Singer, he's not endorsing him in his mind. Like, for example, in that film, there was a couple of cruelty signs, and there was talk about loving other animals, or that was kind of related to animal companions, which interestingly he called companion animals, which again is another language switch that we've made recently. So I just wonder whether, again, the kind of kind personality that he had would be that he wouldn't go, oh, I'm not going to use that image because it says something that that I'm actually opposed to. I think he's almost like too, is he too giving? I mean, he's too giving for the 21st century, but I mean, do you think?
Yeah. Possibly you could say he was too giving, but I suppose another way of looking at it is think of how many times that he mentioned some sort of famous people through history. Now, I don't believe for 1 second he's making the allegation these people are vegan, or they're even that they necessarily care about animal rights per se in the same way that he does. But it's almost like in the same way they're a reference to someone, it's almost like kind of a bit like an appeal to authority, I suppose, but without being of that nature. It's kind of like he respects the fact that these people were highly thought of or highly respected or built their reputations as academics or philosophers or whatever. And it's kind of like it's respecting their acknowledgement, really, or their existence, as opposed to saying, I agree with everything that Aristotle said. I agree with everything that Gandhi said. I think it's more of like this part kind of goes along with what I'm saying, so I'm going to cite them.
Well, 2 points to that. I'm putting my Francione hat on. 2 points to that. First of all, should he at least point out the problem? Because it adds to the confusion if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on context too. So if he was having a conversation with someone, I would like to think that he absolutely would. I don't think that he would, but I mean, in terms of he should have, yes. But I suppose if you're making a short film that's aimed at religious people and you're trying to kind of get them to think in the same way that you are, using things that they already potentially think and believe, I suppose you're not going to be that nitpicky. It's kind of the same with was it the rabbi, or I can't remember which one, but the guy that talks about like factory farming and that being the emphasis. I suppose we've got to take into consideration these people that he's found for this to speak. They're supportive, but they're not vegan. They're not.
Andy, if you made this film, you'd take all that and the factory farming bit and the guy talking about factory farming, and then you'd kind of go, however, from an animal rights point of view,
I would. But as we pointed out earlier, I don't think editing was their strong point. So things like that probably didn't come into their head. Like, well, I could interject here. That probably never entered their mind. That's probably something far more modern. So it may be that he might have done that in an essay, which we wouldn't necessarily.
I'm having difficulty buying that because it's so important for Reagan's philosophy that he would have surely thought of pointing it out.
Well, I'd like to think so, and I'm sure you would too, but clearly not, because otherwise he would have done. And I mean, he had plenty of time after that film came. Yeah, I think it's the same. I mean, there's 20 odd years potentially after that film came out that he could have corrected it, if not longer, 30 years potentially. So, and he never did.
Do you think? You've fallen over. Do you think that we're identifying this kind of kindness of personality, or did he give up? You see, one thing that I've always thought is that, and you can bring this up to date, I think with people like Singer, and Regan and Francione and Cosmic Skeptic, who, the voodoo man of the time, I think they came to the realization that this movement is not very sophisticated. And so therefore, there's no point in making sophisticated philosophical points. And so, as I said before, and I think I said in the last film, Singer was very bitter about being called an animal rights person. And then he's kind of repeated kind of, don't call me animal rights, don't call me animal rights. It kind of, he kind of got worn down as well. And what's the point of saying it? Nobody's going to take it on, especially when you've got Ingrid Newkirk, who basically says to her own philosopher, your animal rights, mate, whether you like it or not, you haven't got any say in it. I'm going to tell you what you are, which is such an arrogant thing for a movement to do to their philosopher. I mean, it's almost like unbelievable to me that anybody would do that.
I would say there's a good chance that that's a big part of it. I suppose, to modernize it even further, we don't so much see the vitriol as much anymore. I mean, that's more like in community now, isn't it? Kind of vegans attacking other vegans, so to speak, in terms of that sort of thing. Like what Reagan would have been upset by people making comments. It wouldn't have been so much the people that were opposed to him. It would have been the in movement fighting that would have actually upset him, the people that he would have considered on the same side, that sort of stuff. Whereas now we've got a lot of people don't like to change their viewpoint, or even to that extent, water down their own viewpoint because they've got an audience to keep around them. And it may well have been exactly the same. If you put out a new idea and you meet a little bit of resistance, people don't want to do that anymore. They want to go back to where it was comfortable, where people were liking and commenting and all that sort of stuff. So it could well have just been that he found out that actually the more that I go down this road, the more resistance I'm going to make. Whereas if I just kind of like pick and choose my battles, and which obviously is very defeatist, but that's how it does appear.
I don't know if I've ever told you, but I actually, a long time ago, it must be over 10 years ago now, I actually set up a petition, and it was directed at PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment. And I was asking them to stop lying about animal liberation. And the reason I use that word lying is because they know that Animal Liberation is not an animal rights book. It's just that they insist on calling it that. I actually contacted Peter Singer, asked him if he would support the petition. And he kind of just got back and said, oh, haven't you got anything more to do with your time, type of thing. He'd kind of given up on influencing them. And again, I just think the arrogance of the implication of all this is just so mind-blowing that it's so upsetting. The idea that a social movement organization won't listen to their own philosopher.
But do you also think that, again, I'm just surmising, but do you also think that didn't help that his personality was the way it was? Let's say that for example, we were talking about Gary Francione wrote the case. Do you not think that he'd have been a bit more like, why isn't my book on your website? Why isn't my book there? Why isn't this happening? As opposed to Reagan just like, just let them do whatever they want. I don't want the trouble.
I don't know about that, because funny enough, I know Animal Aid had Peter Singer all over the books thing. It's all kind of changed a little bit. Like, people don't sell a lot of books anymore like they used to, but Animal Aid used to sell a few of the Singer ones. And so
Animal Liberation is being re-released, don't you, this year?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So yeah. Thanks for that, Andy. And
well, it'll probably have a brand new preface, and they'll resell it under some of the thing, won't they? Because as you say, you're absolutely spot on. Books
Animal Liberation, the vegan book.
Because so they've got to have some reason for re-releasing it, and then because books in general they don't sell, and it's obviously very niche anyway.
Maybe he's updated it, or he's put a new preface or something. But I do remember that I actually had to ask Animal Aid to put Francione's 2000 book intro to animal rights on their thing. I had to ask them to do that, and they did for a while. I doubt if it's there now, but I think most of the books. I think Peter have only got one philosophy book, which is Animal Liberation, and they still say the same as they always have done, that this is an animal rights book. and that if this is the only animal rights book you ever read, then this should be the one. And they know that this is untrue. They know it. They know it. Their own philosopher has told them, but they just ignore all of that. I mean, the arrogance is mind-blowing to me.
But I suppose it also says a lot about the people that don't check this stuff for themselves, because, you know, it's not difficult information to find. I mean, he has repeated this mantra himself many times. It's available to find on this very app we're on now. So again, yeah, Peter are definitely responsible, but come on, there's enough people out there now in this movement that should be looking at this stuff and saying, well, that's not true. Why are they getting away with this? Why is it just like us that are having this conversation? Yeah, but other people must have noticed.
Then you've got the kind of problem of if you go back to the book then and go, well, this looks like animal rights to me, right? And so I think this is where you end up with Francione saying it's an animal confusion movement, because people don't kind of understand the nuances, and in some ways, why should they, right?
True.
Yeah. So I mean, if there are kind of nuanced positions within the movement, how is the rank and file going to latch onto that? You know, I mean, going to some like Melanie Joy and all that thing about, oh, you can get eggs and dairy without violence. I mean, I know loads of people who've read the book and they've never seen that bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you know, people don't read very carefully, I suppose. Maybe they got things on Kindle nowadays. Maybe
I think a lot of it is confirmation bias too. We've had this discussion before about videos where like someone will I'm not going to say any names, but anyone will a biggish name will upload a video 45 minutes long, say within 4 or 5 minutes of it being live, it's got 50 likes. Where you know it's physically impossible for any of those people to watch more than the introduction at absolute best. But it doesn't matter because they don't actually care what the video says. It's just someone they like has released new content, like it. And that's they're not reading it. And I kind of like, if they're not willing to watch a 45-minute video, you really think they're going to read a 450-page book?
Yeah, it's like that joke about politics, isn't it? That you go into the booth and you put a kiss next to the person you like the most. So this is your little.
But it's very similar, isn't it? I mean, we you know, people in general don't read anyway like they used to, but people don't even watch videos anymore the whole way through. You know,
well, we had evidence of that, didn't we? With the We Are Noah, right? It was because in some places the unenhanced, so don't watch versions. One of them is cut into 2, right? But their views from 1 to 2. About half, aren't they? There's about 600 or something. Yeah.
It's a big significant difference of people that either didn't want to watch part 2, couldn't find part 2, gave up too soon, you know, and so yeah, it just shows you that people, and we're talking, what was it, grand total 27 minutes? Not talking about a long film, and yet, yeah, a lot of people give up halfway.
Well, it could be that problem that you just said, is that you don't necessarily get it coming up at the side of your screen.
That's definitely an issue. That's why I decided to combine them for starters rather than do it in 2 separate parts again. Yeah, just in case.
Yeah, it's exactly the same reason why I put all the 4 parts of the Late Late Show together as one.
Oh, I'm just uploading that, in fact, an enhanced version, so we can do that one of the times if you want.
Oh, very good. Yeah, okay, we'll show that again. That goes back to what you said about him fuming and obviously upset, but he didn't let it go, because there's a part where you've got that horrible guy in the audience talking about
the lobsters, Mr.
Pinchy. Yeah, and he goes and licks a cow to see whether the cow is ripe and all this kind of crap, right? And you could just tell by the look in his eyes, he's thinking, "You fucking asshole." But he doesn't say that, does he? You know. So.
And also, though, you can tell as well. I mean, obviously, we don't know him personally, but I've seen enough footage and stuff of him and how he reacts and stuff to think it would have took a lot for him to come to that conclusion too. Most things, he's just, you know, he's so humble about it and laid back, but you can definitely see he's fuming. Yeah, you can understand why. He's been set up a treat on that show.
Yeah, I think actually a few years later, quite a few years later, I think I ended up on a debate panel with that guy.
Really?
As well. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was
so he wasn't just a random guest then. These were like selected.
Oh no, I don't think. Right. I think he was a journalist. But the weird thing was when I was on with him, we talk about fur, and he actually made some good points in the sense that what is the moral difference between fur and other aspects of animal use, and I of course would agree with that, you know. So I ended up agreeing with the guy who kind of tried to take a chunk out of Tom Regan, so that was a bit weird, but there you go.
Again though, talking, I on TikTok I've uploaded that entire thing. I think it's in about 10 or 12 different parts, but that is the most popular video by an absolute mile. I think that's got something like 20,000 views, and the next highest is about 2,000.
Right,
and people, the non-vegans like Mr. Pinchy.
Yeah, I suppose
it's a bit of a cult hero for them.
Just before we go, what do we make from Deb? In my humble opinion, other social justice movements have become more adamant and unapologetic. The animal rights vegans need to take the same stance. Not quite sure who you're referring to in that sense. Would you know what the reference is there, do you think, Andy?
No, but I mean, I agree with the fact that we should be unapologetic in the sense that, you know, we should be, so just like Reagan should have said, look, I don't want that sign about cruelty. I don't want this bit. You know, he should have been a bit more defiant about these things, because otherwise we're the ones that are muddying the water. The more that we allow.
Yeah, but that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, like most people in the animal rights movement don't know what animal rights is. And there's a heck of a lot of vegans who are not objectively vegans, right? And so these are kind of like structural movement issues that are a real concern to us, because sadly the vegan movement is actually smaller than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of vegan movement, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but then the animal rights movement is virtually
even small. It's an even smaller percentage of that too. Yeah. I mean, just understanding the philosophy for a lot of people is a bridge too far. Sadly, I mean, you want to see how small the movement actually is. Go and spend some time on some plant-based recipe groups or something on Facebook, and see when you actually think of how many vegans we've got. It's nowhere near as many as you think, because none of those people are vegan. They don't even know what it means. Haven't got a clue what it means, and no interest in learning what it means either.
All right, so Deb's come back with her examples. So people on abortion rights, voting rights, gun control, yes, and presumably the retention of gun ownership, I suppose, would be. Yeah. So do you think they're kind of getting it right and kind of solidifying, and we're not? I think our problems are different, because I don't know if anybody in the abortion rights movement are arguing about what abortion is. You know, so
yeah, they're not really other movements that I know too much about at all, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I suppose when it comes to the LGBTQ one, I've definitely there's kind of, that's something that I can see in my generation from the time that I've left school, say, until now. Absolutely, that's something that's no longer socially acceptable to be transphobic as it used to be, say, 30 years ago, where you could have programs where they could be outwardly transphobic. That won't be acceptable now, and people are not normalizing this kind of thing. In fact, they're actually openly calling it out, which is something. I mean, you made a good point earlier that, like, these nuances and stuff, as a new vegan, you're not going to know them, but there are plenty of established vegans who do know them, who don't point them out, for exactly the same reason as probably Tom wouldn't point them out, where it's going to cause a scene. Everyone's going to look at me and think that I'm the problem. Yeah, but no one's going to learn otherwise.
I disagree with that one. I think that it's more to do with money for others than with Reagan. I mean, Reagan Reagan wasn't reliant on a particular stance in terms of income, because he was a famous philosopher apart from his work with other animals. So.
Yeah. There was no incentive, the outside incentive. No, it was just in the sense that, like, they don't want to do it for the same reason, like, well, not the same reasons, but a similar reason in the ethics of it, so to speak. Yeah. But I mean, that's one thing about it, isn't it? He actually spent quite a lot of his own money going all over the place. I mean, I know in a couple of his journals he talks about the money that he spent to go and tour America and things like that. Like, this isn't the days where someone was said, "Oh, you want to do a speech at our festival? How much do we have to pay you?" No, you have to pay to go and do these things. Then pay your own hotel, pay your own travel, pay your own everything. It's kind of changed a little bit now. Yeah.
It might have done rather. And we're living in a different world, you might say. Right, people. I want to, I mean, there's 24, 27 people watching, so thank you so much for that. How many vegans could articulate animal rights even at the most basic principle that animals should not be property? I guess, well, I don't know. I see that claim quite often, the property one. So,
I suppose that could they articulate it? They might. I mean, yeah, they might well recognise it and correct someone from something to someone, so to speak. But would they be able to articulate it? I'm not actually sure about that.
Well, where I would go with that, funny enough, is I would, using that kind of topic, I would then talk about the difference between Regan and Francione, because for Francione, that's the one right that he believes other animals deserve or have and deserve legally. Whereas with Regan, he would talk about the right to life, the right to bodily integrity, and something else.
Autonomy, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so you know, Reagan's. You see, I think Francione wanted to kind of slim everything down. So he goes in terms of one right and one criteria, which is sentience, because he didn't really like subject of a life. Although I think that if they had carried on working, subject and a life and sentience would have come together.
Yeah,
really. I think there's evidence that it was anyway. Really, I mean, there's not much. I think
it's a lot of semantics more than anything else. Isn't it?
I think Francione went a bit much of that one. I think so. Where we're going?
But yeah, absolutely right. The right not to be property would more or less cover everything, essentially.
Well, what about free living beings?
Well, I suppose that it depends how you view property, I suppose. I mean, if you go into their habitat and start making decisions that affect them, you're already considering them property without actually having any rights over them. You're just making decisions, you know, in the same way that if I went in your back garden and rearranged your patio table, I don't own that property and I don't claim to, but I am interfering.
Well, good luck with that. I don't have a backyard. But,
you know what I'm saying? I'm still interfering, you know, without actual any ownership changing hands or even assumed ownership.
Yeah, some people say, well, it doesn't cover hunting, but the weird thing about that is, and especially in North America, if you shoot someone who is not human, they become your property, right? And so that kind of covers that in a kind of weird way. And in terms of well, whose property are they when they're alive? It's often seen as a jurisdiction kind of thing. They almost like belong to the state. Or be, you know, and we do that even in the movement. We talk about, you know, our wildlife, you know, and you know, don't kill our foxes and this kind of stuff. We do claim kind of ownership over free living beings in a kind of weird kind of way, which is interesting. So Cliff comes back. What I meant was most vegans could not articulate clearly what we mean when we say animal rights. Well, yeah, but that's because most vegans are not animal rightists, and most people who call themselves animal rights are not animal rightists either, which again, Cosmic Skeptic was the latest person to point that out, you know, when Seb Alex asked him about it, you know, and what I mean, nobody wants to say that Alex O'Connor said anything decent nowadays, but he was spot on about that, you know, so.
Yeah. And it wasn't something he said after he'd come out as no longer being plant-based, was it? It's something he was saying throughout and nobody paid any attention to until he made that announcement.
Well, that's a frustrating thing for me, Andy, because it wasn't until he talked about food that anybody took any bleeding notice. And he was basically saying, I reject what veganism is, and I'm going to reduce it down. So he was a reducitarian vegan. And I don't believe in rights. And I don't believe that other animals have the right to life. And he said this numerous times. Nobody, you know, oh, come on to the camp out, come on to this conference, oh, make a film with us and everything. And then he talks about food, and then the world collapses. So there's something wrong there, I would think. This one's interesting. The vegan movement needs to put together a formal, structured but open study course equivalent to the. Now, I think there are some of those. there are some of those. I mean, I think. I mean, I don't know whether people like Corey Lee Wren, but I do know there are courses that people do run like this. I'm struggling to think of the thing, but they are out there. But I'm not. I'm trying to remember where they are. But yeah, that kind of thing. But it is a good idea. Funny enough, the VIP kind of did this on a weekly basis from 2013 into 2014. When we're in between locations in terms of our gazebo setup and all that. And so we did this kind of informal kind of sociological and philosophical course. So I think we called it, what did we call it? Social movements with a case study for animal rights. So that's either on my YouTube, some of those. And if you go to the Vegan Information Project YouTube page, which sadly I've lost control over, so I can't do anything about it anymore. But there are quite a few of the lectures that we did then, some of the seminars that we did then, and some links to some of the materials that we produced. It was a weekly thing, and we got through quite a lot of work, and we had people, PhD candidates talking. We had people who were talking about human rights and animal rights and the links. We had people like Anthony Nocella II, who worked a lot with Steve Best. He gave a talk about ableism, and a lot of that is still online. So yeah,
let's have a look at that.
Yeah. Okay, people. So thank you once again for staying with us. We're over an hour now, and so I thought this was going to be one of the short ones, but you can never tell. It was my fault for texting you, Andy, and said, "Should we go back?"
That's fine. That's fine. Obviously, there's a couple of bits to talk about just in case.
Yeah. So, people, thanks very much for tuning in, and well, I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully on Still Alive with Ronnie Lee, which is autonomous for the voiceless. We're calling it, and then on Thursday there's another just of the standard. What am I thinking of? Time Tunnel.
Time Tunnel.
Yeah, and then we might have a session on Friday, but we're not sure. And then we'll be back on TikTok on Saturday. So we've got a lot of shit going down, people. So thanks for thanks for joining, and we'll see you real soon, like in 24 hours.
Thank you.